trends over the last 10 years, and one cannot fail to include Indian food on the list of the top 5. The level of integration of Indian food into UK diets is now widespread. Indian restaurants serve 2.5 million Brits every week. Every high street has its Star of India or Taj Mahal. Surprisingly, twice as much Indian food is sold in Britain as fish and chips, and fast food restaurants have had to adapt their British menus to include curry and spice. We are happy to have with us Chef Avinash, alumni from Christ University. May I kindly request Chef Sushil Dwarkanath to do the honors, sharing a few words of introduction about Chef Avinash. Over to Chef Sushil.
Thank you, ma'am. Good afternoon to everybody. I hope I'm audible.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, Chef
Great.
Sushil.
So let's begin without wasting a moment. It's been a great 2 sessions from the morning. Food has always been, lovely speaking about. Doesn't put anybody to sleep. But yes, this session is after your lunch, so it's going to be a continuation of what we actually discussed in the morning. We've seen both the proponents in the morning who's spoken about sustainable food, who's spoken about regional food. Their stress was to eat seasonal. And one thing in common that both of them said, if you all can remember, was to see how the industry can take this forward. Both of them gave their own theories saying, this is what the industry should do. It's high time that we gave up on, buying food from, the other countries, creating carbon miles and things like that. So we have, I think, the right ingredient in place now, the right speaker, who's also a proponent of sustainable and regional produce. And after spending, I think, at least about 15 years in the UK, is still got his love for Indian food. Ladies and gentlemen, we have with us Chef Avinash Shashidhara. Please join me in welcoming him. Avinash, are you here? Can you hear us?
Yeah. Hi, Mr. Sushil. How are you?
Good. Fine. Thanks for being here.
No,
just to give you a brief of what we're doing. Avinash is the dynamic head chef behind the recently opened Pali Hill Restaurant in Fitzrovia in London. Chef Avinash grew up in Bangalore, absorbing the rich culinary heritage of his family's cooking and South Indian traditions and flavors. He's also an alumni of the Department of Hotel Management, Christ College then, and now Christ University. After completing his graduation, he traveled to the UK. He started his career as a chef de partie at the 2 Michelin-starred restaurant called Hibiscus, and after that has over 18 years of experience in renowned kitchens of the world. He's also worked as a sous chef at the Old Bridge Hotel in Cambridge for 2 years before joining the River Cafe in London. He worked there for 10 years and was arguably cooking some of London's best Italian food. In the summer of 2018, he bid farewell to Old Bridge Hotel and spent the next 2 years developing recipes for authentic Indian cuisine. In March 2020, he accepted the role of head chef at Pali Hill at London, and thus continues to offer a curated selection of regional sharing plates, big and small, traditional tandoor and grill dishes, and sides of homemade breads and curries. So, this is Avinash's brief, and I pass the baton to him. And Avinash, it's all yours. And after you finish your discussion, we shall take in question and answers. And also, ladies and gentlemen, he's offered to do this from his restaurant. It was off today, and he gladly offered to go to the restaurant and do so that he can also show you all a bit of how a modern Indian restaurant in London looks like, how the kitchen is, and what are his theories, and the future of Indian food in the UK with a little bit of history. So over to you, Avinash.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Sushil, for that lovely introduction. And hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us this morning. For us, it's morning. So, I hope you had a nice lunch and a nice couple of sessions this afternoon. So, yeah, thanks. We're here in Pali Hill right now, but I thought I'll give you a quick introduction about myself and, how I got to this point. So I went to, I was born and brought up in Bangalore, when it was a nice sleepy town. And then I went to, I did my schooling, and then I decided to join hotel management at Christ, where I met some amazing, inspiring lecturers like Mr. Sushil and Usha ma'am, and a few other people who really inspired us with food. And back then, had no idea of French food or Italian food or anything. The go-to food was dosa and idlis, and that's all we knew when it came to food in general. And these lovely, inspiring teachers showed us what a mother sauce was, and all that kind of complicated stuff, which I never thought I'd ever see, or I hadn't had that exposure from my family. So I studied there for 3 years, and then I was chosen as a management trainee to go and work at the Park Hotels, and I went to Delhi for my management training program, and then I was posted at at Park Bangalore, where I worked at Italia. I think back in 2003, I think Italia was like one of the top Italian restaurants in India. And I think Antonio Carluccio, who, the late Antonio Carluccio, who was one of the pioneers in Italian food, around the world. I think he's really well known. He was doing the menus. So that was where I started learning about Italian food, and I was really inspired by, what the cuisine has in terms of the ethos and all that. Luckily for me, then at that point, there was a lot of chefs that were moving to the UK for work, and there was a shortage of chefs in the UK. So someone offered me a job to go and work at this 2 Michelin star restaurant in the middle of nowhere, in a tiny little village called Ludlow. And I was like, yeah, I grabbed the opportunity, and I moved to Ludlow, with a blink of an eye. And I moved there in 2005, which meant I had about 2.5 years of experience at the Park Hotel. It was a time when molecular gastronomy in the UK was just picking up. So, and Claude Bozy, who was the chef owner of Hibiscus, was doing some really, out there kind of crazy things, because, El Bulli was still open then. Everyone else was kind of following that kind of trend of molecular gastronomy, and, which is almost like 15 years ago. So, if you can imagine a guy from Bangalore going to a place like Hibiscus with no idea of molecular gastronomy, and, it's like being thrown in the deep end. So I stayed there for a year. The conditions of working were really crazy. So I was doing 15, 16 hours every day. But then in terms of learning, there was a lot to learn, so everything I'd learned, I had to unlearn and start again. So which meant, it was a really tough environment. But then, when you talk about molecular gastronomy, that was the best time for it. And I was really lucky to have experienced that. So I decided to take a break from working crazy 15, 16 hours and try and gain back a bit of weight, because I'd lost about 15 kilos in a year. As you can imagine, having 5 hours sleep every day. So then I decided to take a little work at a slightly calmer place, which was the Old Bridge Hotel. The Old Bridge was owned by a guy called John Hoskins. He was like one of the 5 Master of Wines back in 2006, I think. So there were not many people with Master of Wine degrees back then, because it was very expensive, but also it's a very hard course to pass. And from what I can remember, I think only last year or 2 years ago, India had their first Master of Wine. So as you can imagine, with all the academics in India, if they've only just got it, it's quite a tough course. So so it was a really great place to work, where we learned about wines, and actually introduced me to the world of wines, which was a great experience. I was there for 2 years, and then I went to do a stagiaire at River Cafe, like just a couple of days in the kitchen, just to see what they do. And Rose Gray, who was still alive back then, she was like, "Hey, I've been to India. I love India. Tell me more about yourself and all that." And she said, "Come and work for me and teach us about Indian food, and we'll teach you everything we know about Italian food." And that's what made me go and work at River Cafe. So River Cafe was I think a lot of people at this conference have read River Cafe cookbooks or I've heard of River Cafe restaurant. They were one of the best. I mean, one of the first few people in the world to change the way people ate Italian food. And the concept was very simple. It was seasonal. It was exceptional ingredients and simplicity. So going from cooking molecular gastronomy and doing that kind of very complicated, everything weighed and very specific kind of measured food, to going to a place like River Cafe was truly inspiring, because it wasn't people cooking like robots, where you have a weighing scale, you're weighing every ingredient, you're weighing every small glass with 20 grams of this and 30 grams of that, which is what people do with molecular gastronomy and that kind of modern cooking, which I think is very soulless, and it's too precise. So that's what I mean. That was the best thing about working at River Cafe, and they changed their menus every single day, twice a day, and everything was seasonal. It just reminded me of growing up in India, like how we cook at home. So there was a lot of things that were very common to both my upbringing. So, from what I remember, my earliest memories of being a child was being taken to the market as a way of getting rid of us from the house by my dad. We'd go every evening to our local market, and we'd go and find local vegetables, where we were taught how to pick vegetables and go and choose what's in season. This was when I was 4 or 5, I think. And then soon, like when we were 10, 12, we were allowed to go to the markets on our own, or we were sent to the markets on our own, saying, hey, go and pick this vegetable, go and do this, see what's in season, ask the vendors what it is, find the right price on the right day. If it's too expensive, don't buy it. And the concepts that we learned growing up as kids was the concept that River Cafe was following, in terms of how they cook, but also how they feed people. It was all about cooking with your senses, with your eyes, your touch. There was no thermometers. There was no one saying, oh, set the oven at this temperature. We had a wood-fired oven where we'd just throw some logs inside. It would be lit in the morning, and then it would just keep burning all day. So as the fire goes down, you throw another log, you put your hand in the oven and say, hey, this is too hot, this is too cold. And we'd cook everything in there, vegetables, meat, fish, anything that came in. We would prep it from scratch. Like, say, we'd get whole animals, which meant we'd use every part of the body, and we'd cook everything from scratch. Same with fish. We'd bring the fish supplies and say, hey, what have you got today? And they'd say, oh, we didn't land any Dover sole. So we'd say, okay, fine, send us turbot. So everything was sourced locally as well, except some of the vegetables which came from Italy directly. So, we had someone who was a sourcing agent who would go to Italy and buy stuff for us. So, so the concept of sustainability and concept of eating with the seasons, and changing the menu every single day, like it's very simple. The way you would eat at home, like you wouldn't eat the same dishes for lunch. Like, say you eat an idli for breakfast, but maybe you wouldn't have an idli for dinner. It's the same concept. So we had 2 different menus written every day depending on what came in. It's exactly like you would cook at home. So as I was working in River Cafe, of course, I never cooked Indian food for a living, but I also missed Indian food a lot. So I started cooking Indian food at home for my friends, for my colleagues, or we were not allowed to cook anything at Indian food at River Cafe, but Rose would say, hey, make me something once in a while. So that's how I started getting back into cooking food that I'd eaten and cooked growing up at home. So I still remember the first Indian restaurant I went to when I was in Ludlow. The food was something like Indian food. I can still remember the smell of this restaurant when I walked in. So this was about 2 months in. I hadn't eaten a single spice. I was in the middle of nowhere, and I was thinking, God, I could kill for a nice Indian meal. And I walked into this restaurant. It was, it's called the Spice of India, or something really cheesy and ridiculous. So I was like, okay, fine, that's the best I can get. Can't be fussy. And back then I thought, yeah, Indian food must be great in the UK because we had a huge Indian population here. So I remember walking into this Indian restaurant, or so-called Indian restaurant. It was run by, soon I found out it was run by a Bangladeshi couple. and the food was it was okay for the first time, because I was like, wow, you know, I've got a curry, I've got some breads, I've got some new stuff, so I'm just gonna shut up and eat it. I remember taking this takeaway home and opening the package, and there was about half an inch of grease or oil sitting on top, and the breads were like really sweet. It was I mean, the most common bread you get is naan, and they call it naan bread for some reason. And I still remember having that dish, thinking, wow, this is amazing. It's something close to Indian food, and I was very happy. But then the next morning, I didn't feel very good. You know, I had a really bad heartburn, and you know, it was just a bit, it was just not nice. And then I thought, oh, maybe it's just this restaurant. But then I started reading a little bit more about Indian food in the UK. Turns out that, you know, back when the British left India, apparently there was or even before the British left India in the 1800s, you know, there's a lot of sailors from Bangladesh and even Pakistan and India who would sail along with the British troops or with the traders, trading back spices and all that kind of stuff. So some of them were stationed in these ports, you know, around London or in close to Birmingham or any of these places. You know, they would, anywhere there was a trading route, you know, there were people who were stationed there to cook for these, you know, for the traders and for people who, or even the British who lived in India. They fancied a lot of who liked Indian food, would take them back to their homes and, you know, employ them as cooks to cook that kind of Indian food. So you can imagine these were not professional cooks. They never knew how to cook. They were sailors who said, "Hey, you know, here's some spices, make me a curry." You know, so that's how Indian food originated in Britain, and sadly enough, that's the food that has continued uh, to have taken off in this country. So if you see some of the first restaurants in London, for example, you know, Veeraswamy is one of the first few Indian restaurants that was set up in London, and it's London's oldest Indian restaurant. It was set up by a British man, and the reason he brought it to London was because he thought, you know, after independence, they'd left, everyone had gone back to London or the UK, and they were just nostalgic about Indian food, and they said, hey, let's create our own little Indian restaurant in the UK, and that's how the Indian food scene started in the UK. Basically, that's a very short, brief history of how Indian food came in here. And also, like, you know, a lot of people who had moved here already, you know, with the troops, they said, hey, we don't want to go back to India, and they were like, okay, fine, stay back, and they continue to operate their little tiny restaurants in places like Brick Lane, which is close to the, you know, it's more East London, which is closer to the sea and all that kind of place. So you have a huge Indian slash Bangladeshi and Pakistani communities that are settled there. Funnily enough, you know, because Bangladeshis and Pakistanis couldn't sell their food as Indian food, because back then, you know, India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh was a part of India, and they still have a certain kind of cuisine which they couldn't sell as Indian food. I mean, as Pakistani or Bangladeshi food. They said, "Oh, let's call ourselves Indian food," and they started cooking their own version of Indian food, and they came up with some dishes called, you know, say chicken balti, for example. You know, something that was cooked in a balti, you know, like a wok, or you know, they have something called karai, you know, karai chicken, which is cooked in an aluminium karai, you know, and they serve it in those karais, and that became kind of dishes that people thought or associated with Indian food. Soon, you know, they were like, oh wow, you know, this is, you know, a lot of people are interested in this kind of food, and let's start explore, you know, let's start opening up more of these. So I think a lot more people that moved here after post independence, or people who were already living here who were not even cooks, said, oh, you know, he's making money, let's start opening up all these Indian restaurants. So if you look at the UK in general, every town, every village will have something called a curry house. You know, so they're not called Indian restaurants, they're called curry houses. So they, you know, they'll have some really cheesy names like Taj Mahal or Spice of India or Raj of India, or, you know, the Nawab of Delhi, or some really kind of cheesy old names. And you go into, I mean, when you go into these places, it's an experience for, even for Indians, to it just takes you back in time, where, you know, they have these old kind of Raj Kapoor film songs playing in the background with some kind of old, it's only instrumental music, and the menus are all about 3 or 4 pages long with the same dishes. You'll have papadum on arrival, and papadum with mango chutney and mint raita, and then you have like certain dishes like chicken kadai or chicken jalfrezi, and you'll have chicken korma, which is made with coconut, and it's really sweet. And so you have every curry house until about, I think, even in the early 2000s, like till about 2010. This is what, I mean, even now there are hundreds and thousands of restaurants which still operate in little towns and villages, which still serve this kind of Indian food, which has got no history, no base, no authenticity or regionality. So this was something that was originated here. So, but also at the same time, you can imagine, I mean, as you can see, sitting in India, there's, I mean, I left India in 2005. So, the number of expats or people traveling to India has, I think, trebled or quadrupled even, with all the MNCs coming into India and the IT boom in Bangalore and all these, kind of good and bad changes. I think we've had a lot of Westerners move to India. So which means they have tried the real stuff. They have tried regional stuff. They go to Mumbai, they go to Delhi, they go to Bangalore, they go to Chennai, they go to Goa, they go to Kerala. The food in these places are completely different to one another, and yet, back in the UK, they couldn't find this food. There was food which was still from the from the 50s or 40s. So there was a huge need for people to actually try and come up with something that was more real, more kind of approachable, and also that was something more authentic. So that was that was how places started to think. But there was very few. I mean, there was zero places until 2010 that had anything that was close to good Indian food in the UK, or at least in London. So the first of the few Indian restaurants that kind of came up with a concept that was at least something close to Indian food was a restaurant brand called Dishoom. So Dishoom was open in Shoreditch in East London, again close to Brick Lane, where where people would go to say, if you said, where can I eat Indian food in London, they would say, oh, go to Brick Lane or go to Southall or go to. So Southall is again another little area in the west of London where it's full of Punjabis, and they cook that kind of very Punjabi food. And the food is not bad, but it's very Punjabi food, and it could be Punjabi, Indian Punjabi, or it could be the Pakistani version of Punjabi food as well, because because of the border and all that kind of stuff. So, but again, even those restaurants only do very typical food that the Brits thought was Indian food, and so people would either suggest go to Brick Lane or go to Southall. So Dishoom was the first of a few Indian restaurants that opened up in with a bit more focus on interiors. So like I was saying earlier, if you go to an Indian restaurant, it would be like you've been to, like, they'd have decors of like having a palace in the like red seats with people dressed up in Indian costumes, and very cheesy drink selection. You'd have like a Cobra beer on the menu, or you'll have like Kingfisher, which is not bad, but then if you go to 10 of them, it would be a replica of the other one. So Dishoom was the first one who came up, and they said, okay, let's try and change this whole let's bring it up to today's standards. Let's see what we can do. And so they came up with this really amazing Irani cafe concept, which is basically taken from the Britannia, from Britannia restaurant, or like some of those Irani cafes you see in Mumbai. So it was a really Mumbai concept. So the decor was very Mumbai, very cool, relaxed environments where people would go in and order typical dishes like pav bhaji, and then have a veg thali. They have something called a like a bacon naan they do for a brunch menu, which has become very popular. And the food was not cheap. It wasn't too expensive either. So the other thing about Indian restaurants was, because it was run by people from a very underprivileged background, the food that they cooked there was also very cheap. So they used very cheap ingredients. So they used frozen chicken, or they used frozen fish, or they used the cheapest ingredients, or the offcuts of beef, or I mean, sorry, they wouldn't use beef in their menus at all because they thought it's not something that people would eat in India, which is a completely different conversation, which I'll come to. But then they would use cheap cuts and they would make the food really cheap. So which also gave Indian food, or which has given Indian food a really bad reputation when it comes to a price point. So, which is what we are struggling with right now, selling Indian food at a certain price. So people have this misconception of Indian food being cheap. So Dishum, what they did was they continued that kind of concept with the pricing, but then what they did was they very cleverly broke down the menu into different sections where you had to choose 5 or 6 different things and choose sides, which made it look like it's cheap, but then you're ending up, your average spend per person would still be about 30 to 35 pounds, which is kind of the lower end of the spectrum when it comes to eating out in London, for example. So they came up with this beautiful restaurant. People were queuing up outside, and they still do. And then they opened up a second one and third one. So that was the first restaurant that brought something. It was just a step up from a curry house, but it was still different from what people were doing out there in the past. So Dishum was one of those first few places to do that. They opened up 3 other venues, and they're hugely successful. And I think we should all thank them as other Indian food operators for having had that, the guts to actually do it and think it's going to change. And they have made that change. So the second group that did that was the JKS group. So the JKS group is, excuse me, I'm really sorry. I'll be back in one sec. So the JKS group was another restaurant group that started opening up restaurants. The first restaurant they opened was called Trishna, and they also did the same thing. They had a slightly more upmarket. Kind of an approach to it. They said, okay, let's do what Dishum has done, but then we'll also open up restaurants which are doing quality food. So they also started focusing on slightly better quality, but then it was like lamb, but again, they didn't know where the lamb came from or anything like that. Whilst we're talking about all this, don't forget about the other Indian restaurants which are upmarket, like Rasoi or Cinnamon Club, and Atul Kocha's Banaras and all these places. They were also doing very high-end Indian food, but that was again, the same dishes like chicken tikka masala and the typical Indian food that you get in India if you go to a good Indian restaurant. But it wasn't thinking out of the box. They had amazing interiors. They spent all this money. They were also pioneers in Indian food, in making Indian food special. But then it wasn't amazing, or it wasn't modern, or it's not what you get in India, for example. It's not, again, they have their own style. Like they have the chicken tikka on the menu, they'll have their seekh kebab on their menu, they'll have amritsari machi. But again, they had their own box standard dishes, but it was, again, the average spend would be about 60, 70 pounds. So basically what's happened is we've had the curry houses on one side. You've had the Atul Kochas, and you had Vivek Singh and all these amazing cooks that worked at places like Oberoi's and Taj in India that came and opened up these kind of restaurants, which were high-end restaurants, Chutney Mary's and all these kind of places. And then the new world Indian restaurants like Dishum, which is more approachable. So you had the cheap ones that the poor people would go to, or people who couldn't afford an expensive meal would go to, which were curry houses. And then you had the Atul Kocha kind of restaurants, which the rich Indians and the rich British would go to. And then there was nothing for the middleman, who was the middle class people who wanted something good, who traveled to India and who know good food and are interested in ingredients and quality. That's what the JKS group did. So they also started opening up other concepts of Indian food. So they opened something called Brigadiers, which is almost like which is a very manly kind of a place. It's in the city. It's near the bankers area where they started adding concepts. They started saying, oh, let's have a BD room, let's have a cigar room. Where people would go in and they can, the decor is very, very much like a cigar room. It's for boys. They go in, they spend money, they have whiskey, they have their cigars, and they have a lot of curry, and it's a lot of meat based food. But it's also like they had the sports bar in the same same building where they would, they have football matches showing or cricket matches showing where you could book the whole room. It's a very kind of what the brigadiers or, people in the army, British Army would have done back in the day, so the concept is very, very much that, and it's a very butch kind of a manly kind of a concept. So they started coming up because Trishna became super popular and they got a Michelin star. They said, oh, why don't we do some different concepts? So they opened up Gymkhana again. The concept was based on the Gymkhanas in India, which were set up by, in these cantonments where, men would go in and they would, go hunting, and they have a lot of game on their menu. And, so they came up with these different kinds of concepts, and which has opened up room for a lot of other people to come in and, open up different concepts similar to them. So for me, the inspiration to come back to Indian food was exactly that, because, eating all this kind of different kinds of food, there was nothing that would say home food or food that you would eat at home and it's approachable, the concepts that I'd learned at River Cafe, but also had seen growing up in India. So, so I decided to leave River Cafe in 2019. And I thought, okay, let me give it a shot at, doing some Indian food. So that's when I started doing pop-ups. So the way I did pop-ups was basically going to a new country. So the first pop-up I did was Berlin. I went to Germany. Someone said, hey, there's a wine bar that's closed for a while. Do you want to do a pop-up with the people there? I said, yeah, sure. So I collaborated with a sommelier who only does natural wines. So natural wines are wines without any sulfides. It's made in the most natural way possible. They don't use any chemical fertilizers in the way they grow their vines, and also they don't spray anything. There's no, the irrigation is all. There's no unnatural irrigation. It all depends on the rainfall and the terroir and all that kind of stuff. So, which I thought would go really well with Indian food, because and also these wines are slightly oxidized. So, we thought, okay, let's try and do something with wine and Indian food, because as we all know, we either go drinking in India or we go and eat. The concept here is when you go eating, you drink wine with it and all that. So, there's also this mind block of how, there's no such thing as drinking wine with Indian food. So we were trying to try, we said, let's try, see how it goes. So we did this natural wine and Indian food. It was 4 courses in Berlin. We thought we'd probably sell 10 tickets. We had about 60 seats there. We ended up selling 70 seats, and we, packed up this place, and we did some really simple home style food, but using local ingredients. So that was where the concept for me of using. So I didn't have a menu in mind. None of the guests knew what they were going to eat. I turned up like 2 days before, and we said, right, let's cook. I had a few spices and I had a few, things that I'd taken from London, but there was no real menu. And I thought, wow, this is going to be interesting, but also like it's quite nerve-wracking, because you're going there with no concept of what you're going to cook. And that, I think, is the best way to cook any kind of food, because you're going to a place, you're finding the ingredients, and you're cooking the local ingredients. I think when you look back at things, when you look back at Ayurveda, for example, that's what the main ethos of Ayurveda is, like, eat from your land. And I think that's, for me, in my opinion, I think eating from the land is the best way to eat a cuisine. And that's what we did. So we went out, we saw, okay, what's in season? We saw, okay, there's octopus. It's really cheap. Let's pick it up. Let's see what we can do with it. So we made a nice shorba with it. It was like a really spicy fish soup, almost like a Hyderabadi meaty shorba. But then, when you eat octopus, it's quite meaty. So we said, okay, let's try out this recipe. And we came up with this really beautiful shorba. And, we served it with a little bit of, just a tiny sprinkling of rice in there for a bit of texture. And we tried it on the day before, and we said, wow, this is amazing. Let's do this recipe. And then we saw some pigeons we marinated with some sweet spices and yogurt and all that. We put on the grill. It tasted like a tandoori dish, but then it was using local ingredients. People came in, they were like, wow, this is crazy. Like, we never thought we would try flavors like this. And also the wines went really well. I mean, some dishes were a little bit out there. We were like, what do we do for dessert? We were like, okay, fine. what's the most common thing I had as a kid? You know, we were like, there were only two ice creams that we got when we were growing up. You know, there was this brand called Joy ice cream that everyone remembers, and there was either vanilla or pistachio. You don't get any other flavors. I mean, we never got any other flavors in India. We said, okay, let's do pistachio ice cream. So we created this cake with pistachio cake with cardamom in it, and we made this ice cream with pistachio in it, and we said, okay, this is what we're going to serve as dessert. So, you know, it's not very typically Indian, but then we thought, okay, this is kind of close to Indian, let's do it. So we did that, and then, you know, I did the same in Copenhagen. We went there, and, you know, in the middle of winter, we went to Copenhagen. We said, right, we'll go and see what we can do. So there was the only ingredients we were getting was cabbage, pork, kale, some carrots, and root vegetables. And we said, wow, these are the ingredients we would normally use. We made a cabbage toran. You know, we made like a slow cooked pandi curry with you know, with spices. You know, the pork classic kurgi pandi curry. You know, we made it with the most beautiful pork shoulder. You know, so we were using some. I mean, the place we did the pop up also was where, you know, we had, I think 30% of the restaurant had worked at Noma. You know, so they were 100% organic, this restaurant. So they said, you can't bring any of your ingredients. Whatever you need in terms of spices, we have everything, and it's all organic. They are 100% organic certified. So we couldn't even take our ingredients. So we had to use even rice. You know, they had organic basmati rice. They had like organic wheat flour. They had organic spices, turmeric. Everything was organic. So which was, again, really amazing to see how, you know, a country like Denmark, where you think, oh God, it's dead and barren in the winter, you could still create something with what's around us. There was no need for asparagus in the middle of winter. You know, so that was another thing we did. And also, like, you know, I thought, oh, maybe I should go. So a friend of mine who lives in Delhi, I thought, okay, how about trying out this food in Delhi? So I decided to go and do a pop-up in Delhi, where we thought the Delhiites might just not like the kind of food we're doing. So we tried that concept in Delhi as well. Just turned out, we said, let's do this. But this time we did it with Italian food, you know, and it really worked. We were using, you know, some really simple ingredients like cauliflower and this and that. And we were, you know, we made this Italian menu, and also we made an Indian menu the following day. So we did 2 pop-ups in Delhi. So, you know, I just ended up exploring myself and how I could create something that was slightly different to what we were used to eating in London as Indian food. And, you know, I really wanted to set up my own restaurant in terms of, you know, that kind of concept. So that's, and at the same time, you know, Pali Hill were looking for a consultant, and I said, you know, happened to be a friend, and I said, okay, let me, you know, let me try and jump on that wagon and see how we can set up this concept. So, you know, so I was very honest with them, and I said, hey, look, you know, I don't have an Indian cooking background. And they said, fine, you know, let's come up with some dishes. So we started getting inspiration for Pali Hill through regionality. So my main goal with Pali Hill was basically trying to find regionality, trying to cook with the seasons here, but also doing something that no one had done no one really does that much in the UK, which is using quality ingredients. So the focus for me and our concept here is using the best possible quality ingredients. Like, say, our lamb, we know what farm it comes from, you know, we know where it was grown and how many acres of land it runs around in, you know, and, you know, it comes from Cornwall. We know, you know, the abattoir is called Jasper's Abattoir, you know, where they slaughter the meat, and it's hung for 24 days to 28 days. We know how aged it is. And, you know, we have, with every single ingredient or every single dish on the menu, we have a story, you know. So that is the concept of Pali Hill. And also, like, the concept was like, you know, how often do we have starters, mains, desserts in our homes? You know, we don't really eat that way in India. You know, you go to a wedding, you eat at home, you know, you have a festival, you know, you don't start with a starter, you start with a sweet. In fact, you know, you start with a dessert. The first thing they put on the plate, I mean, of course, they put salt and pickle and all that kind of stuff, but you know, the first thing you eat at a festival or a wedding is a sweet. You know, so how can you know, it's breaking those boundaries of how a menu should be planned. You know, the menus that we make here are based on ingredients, it's based on stories of each dish, sourcing locally, which is most important to me, because, you know, we have to be sustainable in a world that you know, that is really, you know, being exploited with carbon footprint, and importing ingredients from say New Zealand or Australia, where we live in the UK, and we're an island. We can't buy. For me, it breaks my heart when I see we live in an island and yet we're importing tiger prawns from the Indian Ocean. Why are we doing that kind of stuff? So for me, it was about thinking out of the box. When people say modern Indian food doesn't mean cooking molecular gastronomy. That is something I did 15 years ago. That's just messing around with the food. I always say to my colleagues here, when people say molecular gastronomy, you think of chefs. I say molecular gastronomy is for chefs. The food we cook and eat from the land, and the kind of concept we're doing here should be for the gods. Because in India we offer food for the gods, and what we offer is what we would eat, and it's most dear to us and special to us. So that's how we should cook, with our senses, with our with local ingredients. So if you look at our menu, for example, which I'll try and send to you, we have small plates, big plates. Which is small plates. We've got dishes like kakra, for example. Kakra is a very common Gujarati snack you eat in the afternoon or in the evenings, just when you're feeling peckish. So we just make kakra with in house. They're not perfectly round, but we just make them into big long sheets. We bake them, and we just smear it with a bit of chili pickle, which again we make in house. So the other concept is trying to bring back all those old traditions of making things in house. I think we're forgetting our roots, and we're not modernizing our food. We're actually going backwards in time. We're going back to a time where we made everything in house. We make our own yogurt, we make our own ghee, we make our own butter. We make our own pickle, we make our own garam masala. Where's that gone? It's not modernizing food. It's going back to the ancient times. Like say our roti, for example. It's a tandoori sourdough roti. We call it sourdough roti because we're using a sourdough culture here. As we all know, sourdough roti has become this new thing where everyone's saying, "Oh, sourdough roti, sourdough bread." It's the new thing. But in fact, when you look at it, when you look at history, I think it's a very ancient concept. The Egyptians made it. The Nordics made it. The Indians, in a way, we make it as well, because if you go to places like Delhi, when they make the dough overnight or the previous night, and it's left out. When you go to those markets in Delhi, where they're making these breads, it's so hot. The temperature is like 45 degrees. That dough is going to ferment in some way or the other. So it is a form of a sourdough bread. But that's why bread tastes amazing in certain parts of the country. Like say if you go to Delhi, especially I say Delhi because that's where or Punjab, for example, the weather is such that, and the grain is such, the wheat flour they use is such that it has a lot of natural yeast in it, which activate when you add water and and you leave it overnight, or it just ferments naturally. So the concept is not new, it's not modern, it's just going back to ancient ways. But also like we're being very clever with the kind of ingredients and dishes we're creating. It's not very like say we have very traditional dishes, like we have a thali where we're using like a toran, for example, but we're using broad beans in our in the toran, which is in season right now. We have a Gujarati curry. Every restaurant you go to has a dal, and you have some other dishes, but curry is something that's so staple for the Gujaratis and vegetarians, so we're using that, for example. Or like say paneer is something that's widely eaten in India. It's not my personal favorite, but the Indians that come in here, they say, "Oh, we need a paneer, there's no this," and we're like, okay, fine, let's create a paneer dish, but then how can we make it more Indian and make it more rustic? So we were like, I was exploring what the Pahadis eat, and there was saag paneer on the, they were doing saag aloo, for example, but then they use bichu booty, which is nettles, Himalayan nettles. They eat bichu booty ka saag. So we were like, oh, it's spring here. Why don't we use bichu booty ka saag and make a really tasty, healthy, nutritious saag? And we put paneer. Again, the paneer, we were like, okay, we just don't want to buy about box standard paneer. So there's a mozzarella producer down the road called La Lateria, and she only makes ricotta and mozzarella. So we've approached her and we've said, okay, look, can you make us some paneer, because we want some really good quality, high fat paneer with buffalo milk, and that's how traditional paneer is made. And we gave her a recipe, and she came up with this amazing paneer. So we've taken something from our culture, which is so rustic. That's like from the Himachal, like bichu buti ka saag. And, we've just picked the local nettles, which you can go and forage everywhere. And, your bed supply will bring it to you. And we've made this really nice saag paneer. And people think it's modern food, but in fact, it's something that's already there that we're just exploring. Say, we've got an asparagus dish on the menu. Asparagus is a superfood. We don't use it in Indian food, but then it's one of the most amazing, nutritious superfoods that you get in the springtime here. You can imagine if the land is barren for all these months, the first things that come out of the soil have so much nutrients from the soil because the land's been barren. Things like nettles and things like asparagus. So asparagus, we thought, is a superfood. Let's use it. And I was again exploring, what is a superfood in India, and hemp seeds or hemp has become, it's always been a superfood for Pahadis and in the north and northeast and all that, and they use it a lot in their chutneys and that kind of stuff. And the Italians use it with pesto and that kind of stuff using pine nuts. So we were like, why don't we make a bang jeera chutney? And it looks like a pesto. It tastes nutty. It tastes completely Indian, and it's a very staple home dish. And we'll just grill some asparagus, and we'll serve it with that chutney. And we tried it, and it tastes amazing. It tastes like a beautifully grilled vegetable with hemp seed. It's healthy. It's not greasy. It's bringing Indian food to to the modern times, but with traditional recipes, but also recipes that people would only eat at home and that kind of stuff. We've got mango buns on the menu. Mango bun is something that people would eat on the street in the evenings with their tea. So it's kind of made with banana, it's crushed up banana and yogurt, and so when you always eat it with a spicy chutney for breakfast or in the evenings with tea and that kind of snacky thing. So we decided we've got beautiful big brown crabs that weigh almost 1 kilo each. So we said, why don't we make a nice crab sukka, which is kind of a dish that is served with a bread or something like that. And we said, let's put them two together and see how it tastes. So it's this sweetish kind of buns, which is normally served with a very spicy chutney. We said, let's do it with crab sukka, but also crab sukka is something that you eat in Mangalore as well. So it's trying to be authentic to that region. Mangalore buns with crab sukka, very simple, very traditional. We just do a simple, fennel seed and chili and coriander seed kind of a masala, and we cook our crab meat in there, and we serve it together. And we just tell our guests, okay, this is, you tear the buns, stuff it with the crab, and you eat it. Again, it's not. What I'm trying to say is we are modernizing Indian food, but without taking away the traditional roots. So that's how our menus are made here. And the menus are one page. That is our menu. That's it, one page. And we've got wines at the back, which go with, with the food. We've matched our wines with the food, so it's very simple. Gone are the days when people would make a booklet of menus. Like no one has the time. It's even this. I feel we've got 23 dishes, and I want to make this 15 dishes or 10 dishes where we're showcasing the best produce on the day using traditional recipes. So and our menus here change. Like at the moment, we've been very unfortunate that we don't have menus. We don't have, we haven't been open for that long because of the lockdowns and all that. But then my idea is to have a very small menu where I bring my supplier and say, hey, what have you got? Send me the best produce on the day, and we'll use that. And that's how we want to move forward and change the menu seasonally as we would at home every week or every single day if I can. It's a hard concept to explain to some of our chefs as well. Some of these guys have been working at Indian restaurants for 25 years. You can imagine it's like taming a bull. They are like, chef, this is not Indian food. Yeah, Indian food nahi hai, kya kar rahe ho, ye wo, and like now slowly they understand, oh, okay, when people come in and say, wow, this is amazing, we've never heard of this dish, or I've never tried this combination, they're thinking, wow, oh, we're doing something right. So it takes time to change their mindset as well. So I think to slightly summarize about the food, I think we should all be cooking with local ingredients. Forget about the asparagus coming from Peru or the lamb coming from Australia or New Zealand. I think if you were cooking in India, try and use local produce. Try and I'm sure there are beautiful breeds of animals and fish and all these kind of beautiful vegetables that we've forgotten. Go back to pickling your own vegetables and fruits, and um, try and do everything. Try and encourage your students and people to think with the seasons, cook with the seasons, but also eat healthy, because there's a lack of focus on vegetarian food. If you look at our menu, I think 40% of our dishes are vegetarian. And also, I think we come from a rich culture of vegetarianism in India, and I think that's something that we should really focus on as well, because that's what we're really good at. I mean, I was born and brought up a vegetarian, and there's a huge emphasis on vegetarianism here that I put into people. Veganism is something that is a choice, but also I think without even thinking, we have a lot of vegan dishes in Indian food. So I think that's something that we can obviously focus on. But also like local meats. I keep stressing this about, every time I go to India, I tell my friends and they say, oh, they're very proud to get meat from New Zealand. Oh, this is a New Zealand lamb chop. And I'm like, well, where's the Indian lamb chops? Where are the Indian lamb? Like you see shepherds everywhere in India. What about their meat? Why don't we educate ourselves to bring that meat or that produce up to standards? I think it's our responsibility more than anything else, trying to educate our farmers, or trying to educate our our restaurants and the future of our restaurants, like people who are your students, who are who are going to be the future of the industry, to try and encourage farmers to grow things in a certain way, or grow things, or like breed animals in a certain way. I think that's where the focus should be on. I think when it comes to Indian I mean the animal husbandry in India. The one final point that I missed out was, with our menus, is we do have ingredients that, is breaking barriers about Indian food. Like say pork, they say, guests who come here, it's educating people as well about the food. Like say, so they say, oh, pork. I thought pork, you can't eat pork in India, and I'm like, well, do you know how many Christians live in India? Like, it's almost 10% of the population, or even more. I mean, I don't know the exact number, but I think there's a huge Christian population that eat pork in India. Of course, the Muslims don't eat it, and but then we've got a huge Muslim population that eat beef. They are a part of our culture. They are a part of Indian food, and we should be proud of those dishes too. And that's something that we also want to showcase. In our menus, or through our menus. We've got, so one of the pictures that you saw, with the ribs, are pork ribs, which we marinate. It's almost like an Indian version of a barbecue, except with a kurgi take on it. We have black pepper in there. We've got some fennel seeds in there. We've got some jaggery, and it's like a sweet, hot and sour kind of a dish that we grill. Also, we have veal shin on the menu. Veal is a young cow, and we've done it in a chettinad style. So the inspiration for that comes from the ossobuco, classic ossobuco of lamb, which is an Italian dish, and we thought, that's something that would be really amazing for this cold. We say we're in summer, but then our temperatures don't go beyond 20 degrees over here. So veal shin, slowly cooked with all these spices for about 5-6 hours. It's beautiful, gelatinous, and it's something that people wouldn't associate with our cuisine, but we thought it's a great ingredient, it's a great recipe, let's put them together and see what comes out of it. So things like that. But we also have very traditional dishes like patrani machi, but we've done it very traditionally in banana leaf, and we use good quality sea bass. So yeah, so that's me to summarize the whole thing. But I can show you a little bit of the restaurant itself and see how how the whole restaurant's also modernized in terms of the way we showcase our culture. So if you see in the background, we've got this beautiful kind of it's a collage made by a really good artist in Delhi. As you can see, this lady is wearing heels, but then the top is traditional. So the concept already says we're a modern Indian restaurant with traditional roots. The concept for Pali Hill in general is, let me try and figure out if I can flip this video around. Okay, there we go. That's better. So let me walk you through the restaurant so you can see what it looks like. It's almost like a virtual tour because I don't have a presentation. I thought this would be a nice way to kind of end the whole seminar. So I can walk you through so just remember we're closed today, so that's why it's not all set up, but this is how. So you come in, you've got this, so the concept is basically a building society, where, it's where in Mumbai, for example, or in Bangalore, anywhere you go, you've got this building society where you have a melting pot of people, have had people from all over the country, maybe even the world, where you have Tamilian living next to a Gujarati, and during festivals or any time of the year, you'd have some dabbas that are going between homes. So the food is traditional, it's homely, it's kind of sharing kind of food where if someone sends you a dabba, you don't never send it back empty, so you fill it with some other kind of cuisine and you send it back. So that's how the concept is. So if you can see the interiors, they're all very tastefully done. You see the chairs and tables, they're all very kind of home kind of furniture. It's not restaurant furniture. They're very comfortable. They have some amazing collages. They've taken inspirations from old kind of Indian brands, like you can see there's dalda there and there's some fruity there and all that kind of stuff, but it's also very modern when you look at it. They have the old scooter there, they have poppins and that kind of stuff, but it's also, like, say, all these walls, and they have some really cool Parsi kind of paintings but with a modern touch there. So, and then we also have an open style kitchen. Gone are the days when Indian kitchens were in basements, where people are stuck in a basement, and we as you can see, when it's an open kitchen, everything is super clean and tidy. So we have a rabata grill, which is like a Japanese style grill, very powerful. We have a lot of dishes grilled, which makes the food a lot more healthy because, as you know, we don't need much oil when you're cooking on the grill. We've got a small tandoor. It's not, I mean, unfortunately for us, we can't have traditional charcoal in here because of the restrictions from the council. So it's a very compact setup. As you can see, we can do 65 covers here. This is all we have when it comes to the downstairs kitchen, the upstairs kitchen. And you can see this is the view from the kitchen. It's very sleek, very kind of modern. There's no, there's no pictures of, Bollywood stars and that kind of stuff upstairs. But also downstairs, when we go downstairs, I'm just going to walk you downstairs to this bar which we have. It's meant to be a speakeasy concept. Excuse me if the signal goes bad, but I think it should be fine. So we've got this lovely gentleman here who apparently solves a lot of problems. So we've got some funny stuff there, but also we've got some really beautiful portraits of some typical scenes in Mumbai and in India. And you would see he's the lift man in Mumbai. And here we've got this speakeasy bar. So it's called Bandra Bhai. Again, the inspiration for this place comes from the Art Deco dens in Mumbai, where people would. It used to be those smuggling bars where imported goods were banned in the 70s and 80s, where people had to go into these underground bars where they would deal Rolex watches, or they'd deal a bottle of Black Label whiskey or something, very very cheesy, and they'd have some dancers there and that kind of stuff. But again, you see the design is all very Art Deco. You see these wallpapers are very beautiful and traditional, yet very classy at the same time. We've got some very typical old school posters here because the concept is Mumbai, so they have some funny stuff like that. Also, if you look at the bar, it's all kind of cocktails which have got inspiration from stories in India. So yeah, and through here you can see, again, we've got another room. We've got some very cool posters and portraits of scenes from India. We've got a peacock there, which it's a stuffed peacock. And then, yeah, so, but also, like, when you think of the concept here, we are doing food that you would normally not see upstairs, which is the traditional kind of cheesy thing. We've got the chicken tikka downstairs, where we wouldn't do it upstairs. We have like say chili cheese toast kind of a concept, but it's not your typical chili cheese toast that you would get on the street. We make it with a really nice bread and that kind of stuff. So, and also the cocktails have been inspired by stories from India as well. So yeah, I think when you think of when you think of, there we go. Yeah, so also it's not just the food, it's also things like, it's also, sorry, I'm really sorry, I'm trying to sort this out. Oh yeah, it's also the interiors, and the stories that we're telling are also very modern. We're not trying to make this very cheesy, like all the other Indian restaurants. So yeah, I mean, I hope this was kind of a nice introduction, or like you got a good feel of what Indian restaurants are doing in the UK. And I'm happy to take questions. I'm happy to. I think it's been an hour since I've been blabbering away. I hope you got something out of this, and I'm happy to take any questions now.
Yeah, Avinash, thanks for your talk. We have a couple of questions that have already come in. I think we can take those and then proceed with that.
Sure.
Would you want to read them, or would you like me to read it? How do you want it?
I think. Let me see. I'm trying to. I think I'm not very good with technology, so I'm just trying to.
Okay, let me
there you
read
go.
out the questions.
Yeah. Let me. Yeah, I got it. There we go.
Give me a moment.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, the first question is by Mr. K.S. Narayan. He
Yeah.
said, what nomenclature do we give to Indian food prepared, served and eaten in the UK, since it is just 1 decade since good Indian restaurant is opened?
What do you mean by nomenclature? Sorry, it's a
Do
very
you
big
feel
word
that
for me.
does any cuisine have a name there or something like that? Probably.
Sorry?
Does the cuisine have a certain name there? Does it get identified by a certain kind of a name? I guess.
We don't really have. See,
Like
the kind of food
okay, what I feel is like you have curry houses, okay, which has the greasy
No,
and stuff.
I think we don't really have. I mean, we're not branded as. I think slowly now people are calling us Indian restaurants. Which is what we should be called. We've been called like the new. Well, I mean, like they don't even call us modern Indian restaurants. Like say someone like Indian Accent opened here, and they closed down within 6 months because it wasn't sustainable for them. Of course they were busy and all that kind of stuff. But then the kind of food they're cooking is I mean, it's modern, but it's not something that people want to eat. Like people, so we like said the restaurants like ourselves, and so Dishum is more like it's a completely different branding. They are like a Irani cafe. They're also like it's also called an Indian restaurant, but then they are more like a step up from a curry house. And what we're doing here is we don't really have a name. We just call Indian restaurants, basically. Not even modern Indian restaurants, because that's not what we are. So
Okay.
yeah. But I think we're getting a reputation for being God, I don't think we haven't been branded as a certain kind of restaurant, but I think we are getting a reputation of being good, sustainable Indian restaurants, or Indian restaurants with traditional roots, I guess.
How would you compare restaurants like I think Bombay Brasserie, or the one which Chef Sriram has also at
Quilon?
Quilon, correct.
I think that, see, the thing is, those kind of restaurants are very good. They do some of their traditional dishes, but they're also very stuck in their old ways of. Not in a bad way. I don't mean like stuck in a bad way, but they're also very much like Indian restaurants and hotels in India. They're doing good food, but it's nothing different. It's not like what I was talking about. It's not sustainable. It's not like food from that changes with the seasons, or trying to do something innovative. They're still doing really amazing food, but it's all very much still in the days of of the Taj and Oberoi's, which is doing things correctly and really well, but they don't want to change.
Okay. We have another question.
Yeah.
We have another question by Professor Usha Dinakaran. She wants to know,
Yeah.
do UK citizens patronize your restaurant? Do you have locals coming in?
Yeah,
Or
absolutely.
what's the kind of clientele that you want?
I think 70% of our customers are, non-Indians. We get a lot of Indians who come in here as well, but they are Indians who are, educated about, like ourselves, they know about good food. They appreciate good quality ingredients. They appreciate the healthier stuff. I'm not saying, the other restaurants are cooking unhealthy food, but most of the times you go to other restaurants, they have a lot of greasy, really kind of drenched in oil and, that kind of food, which I don't think people want to eat that kind of food these days, especially in London, where people are very, very health conscious. They want something that's light, and, they don't want to leave the restaurant feeling like, oh God, tomorrow I'm going to be getting burps of the food I ate today.
Okay. Another question again by Mr. K.S. Narayan.
Yeah.
He wants to know, how is Indian food visualized in the UK, as still it is addressed as a curry food? Is it still called curry food? Second question is, with so many
No,
Pakistani
no.
restaurants,
I mean, look,
feeling
there is a
people
market for
coming-
that kind of food. I think there's a market for that kind of food, which, but there was a recent article that said the death of the curry house. They were talking about how all these new age Indian restaurants, like, the ones I mentioned, Dishum and Trishna and Brigadier's and all these places who have cropped up, and they're really changing the face of Indian food in the UK, not just in India. Dishum's opened up something in Birmingham and all these other places. I think the curry concept still exists, and it will for at least another decade, because it's existed for 50 years or 100 years, or so. I think it is changing at a really fast pace with people like ourselves. We're doing a lot more in terms of showing our presence in places like, good magazines and newspapers and all those kind of places where we're talking about good ingredients. And, like I was talking for the last hour, the focus is always on sustainability, healthy eating and all that. So it's definitely changing. So we'd still get, because the original site that was here before we opened up was a restaurant called Gaylord, which had been there for 60 years. So we still get, 70, 80-year-olds who come in and they say, oh, that food is so good. We should bring back some of those dishes and all that kind of stuff. But I think slowly with them passing on, I think it will change. I think a lot of things will change.
Okay.
Yeah.
Another question is,
Yeah.
give me a
Yeah.
minute. How have you
Yeah.
adopted to your plates? How have you adopted your plates to home deliveries? This is Miss Vasundhara. Who would like to know.
To be honest, like, we haven't done any home deliveries, which has been one of our toughest calls, because, during the lockdown, we said, oh, we should try and do some home deliveries, but we realized that our food doesn't travel. It doesn't travel well. It doesn't look good when it gets home, and we don't want to be delivering. I think a lot of people are doing it, but what we did instead were kits, home kits. Where we would create a dish. We'd give them, like, say we did something like we did a fish curry, and we've got a very home style fish curry on the menu. So we did the sauce, which we backpacked, and then we did some fish which was not cooked. We backpacked that as well, but really high quality fish and mussels. And then we made dosa batter, and then we sent it out to people, and we sent them a video of how they can finish that dish at home, because people are sitting at home, they're also bored, they want an activity. So we said, here's a fish curry base, here's really cool, good quality fish. Heat up your fish curry, drop the fish in, takes 3 to 4 minutes to cook, and here's a dosa, here's a video how to make it. It's a nice pancake, enjoy it. So that's what we tried to do, rather than doing home deliveries.
Okay.
So the other home delivery concept was veal shin and Kerala parota. So we made the Kerala parota, the dough, and we made it into like a pinwheel, and we sent the dough itself already folded. All they had to do is roll it out and cook it on a pan, heat up the veal shin in the oven for 10 to 15 minutes, and eat it together. So that was one of the innovative ways of getting people involved, but also make it more interesting for them, rather than saying, "Oh, here's a home delivery, just eat it." So that's how we adapted. our food.
Okay. Professor Zakaria would like to know that is
Yeah.
there a market for regional Indian restaurants, like a typically Chettinad restaurant serving only Chettinad cuisine,
Yes,
unlike
absolutely.
regional
Yeah.
Indian restaurants in UK, which is more like a coffee shop menu?
I mean, absolutely. I think there's definitely slowly, I think you'll start seeing more of them as well. Because, see, right now we're trying to introduce people to kind of real Indian food, which is really hard. Like, say, my idea, if I personally had to do an Indian restaurant, I would do a Darshini. Um, just one sec. Ali, someone at the door. Sorry. Yeah, so if I had to do a typical Indian restaurant, I would do something like food from Karnataka, for example, because that's where I was born and brought up. And we have this huge, cuisine. We've got like food from the north of Karnataka, which is really kind of arid and dry region, lots of chili and that sort of stuff. And we've got coastal area, we've got vegetarians in Bangalore. So that's the kind of concept. I think it is the future of Indian food. I think that's where we're heading now, because people are talking more about, oh, food from Mumbai, food from Tamil Nadu, food from here. So definitely there is a huge scope, and for that kind of food. I think that's what I would be convincing these guys to do in the next restaurant.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Okay, Chef Sachin Wilfred, a
Yeah.
patisserie himself, would like to know.
Mhm.
Chef, he says, Chef, curious to know about the dessert menu you have at your restaurant.
Yeah.
Have you trained our classic authentic dessert, or is as it is, or you had to rework or modernize?
We have one really like, say, our dessert plates are very small. We have 4 desserts. One is, so the idea behind how we made the dessert menu, one was a traditional carrot halwa. I think carrot halwa is something that people can relate to here. Like, say, if you think of the palate here as well, yes, there's one thing trying to give people traditional sweets, but people they don't have a really, they don't have a sweet tooth, so something like a carrot halwa they can relate to, because it's very similar to a carrot cake, for example, without the cake itself. So we have carrot halwa on the menu with we're just doing like a vanilla ice cream and pistachio on top, which is really popular. The other desserts we have, I've got a really nice flourless chocolate coconut and rum cake, which is, again, like a mousse. It's a flourless cake. It was a recipe that I stole from Reva Cafe and adapted it to my own flavors. And we have like an ice gola, which is, ice gola is something that we all ate on the streets growing up. It's traditional, but it's also fun, and you can play with different flavors. So we've got, last season I had a pomegranate ice gola, basically, pomegranate juice, concentrate, which we just kind of scrape off. It's like a granita, but it's using seasonal flavors. Like, we had pomegranate last season, we have passion fruit this season. I think we'll have to come up with something. We'll see. There's some berries. We're going to get some cherries and berries in the next season. So we're going to try and create something that's that. So, and then we've got an Alfonso mango cheesecake on the menu right now, or people can even order just an Alfonso mango. So it's, say, in India, for example, like, it's the peak of summer. I think most people would just eat a mango as a sweet, or they would just make like like a puree of mango and just eat it on its own as a traditional sweet. So we're just trying to keep it very simple with desserts, because we don't want to make like a. But having said that, I think there is a huge scope for modernizing Indian sweets as well. I think that would be something that we would look into in the future, for sure, for sure.
Okay, so I think that answers Sachin's question.
Yeah,
Another gentleman, Mr. Atin Das, would like to know,
yeah.
can you explain again how you are sending the videos along with home delivery food?
I mean, we have Instagram posts, but also we did, a couple of them. We did QR codes. We did a video, and we sent, we made a QR code for the video. So when we send them the food with the heating instructions, there's a QR code they can scan, and then you get a video that pops up. So it's just really simple. Or we would just send them the link. We just send them a link to the video on, for our Instagram account or Facebook account, and they would just find it there.
Okay. Thanks, Avinash. Another question by Dr. Pankaj Kumar Singh. He wants to know, how did
Yeah.
you replace cold drinks or ice creams in this pandemic?
How did we replace?
How did you replace? Did you have something else instead of cold drinks or ice creams?
Not really. Why? Why would we? Why would we replace them?
Okay, maybe I think Dr. Pankaj, you can maybe repeat your question once again and elaborate and ask. Meanwhile, let me take another question by Mr.
Excuse me.
Vijay Pan.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, Mr. Pankaj.
Myself, Dr. Pankaj Kumar Singh from IIT BHU.
Yes, sir.
Presently, there is in the corona, there is some cough problem occurring. Due to that, the ice cream and cold drink are avoided by so many persons. Then my
Okay,
question
so
is that
yeah.
how you are going to replace these two?
We don't really have any restrictions. Like here, we don't have any restrictions with ice creams or cold drinks. In the UK, we don't have any such restrictions. We haven't been told about any of these kind of things. So, so we don't we haven't really thought about that. So, yeah, I'm really sorry. I can't help you with that. Don't have a solution to that problem.
Probably on a lighter note, I think your single malt takes care of that before the ice creams.
Yes.
Okay, we have another question by Mr. Vijay Pant, who wants to know, during
Yeah.
Indian festivals, do you also provide festival or theme-based menus? And how's the response?
Yes. I mean, like I said, we haven't been open for very long. So, right now I mean, I think the next thing that we're going to make a bit of a PR noise with is, there are two things. First of all, we're doing a charity event next Sunday, which is a brunch menu. It's called 1 Billion Breaths. It's a charity that's raising money for the crisis in India, for help to help buy more oxygen for Indians that have been really badly affected by the pandemic. So that's an event that we're doing, and we're promoting it as a Bangalore brunch. Because I grew up in Bangalore, every Sunday we would go to a brunch and then have some typical dishes. So we're going to focus on things like appam and stew, or we have pav bhaji and that kind of very simple things. But this, although they're not very Bangalore dishes, they are things that we eat as a part of Bangalore brunch. Fish curry and and dosa and that kind of those kind of very simple dishes. So we're doing that as a themed lunch. But also, I think the next one we're doing is something we're planning something for Independence Day, and I've seen other restaurants doing it, and they have been hugely successful, especially amongst the Indian communities. During Onam, I think they do like a nice sadhya. During Holi, they have like a little, they have a little. The whole place is decorated with flowers, and people come in and they have a little, they have some colors and they make something with bhang and that kind of stuff. So I think these concepts definitely are becoming more popular, and people here who have been to India, they just come back and say, oh, we lived in Pali Hill. So, I heard the name of the Pali Hill, which is an area in Mumbai. They say, oh, we lived in Pali Hill, so we thought we'll come and try the restaurant. So they always have this attachment to some nostalgic things that they saw in India, or they were there, for Diwali. Or for Diwali, we wanted to have like a Diwali menu with lamps on the table and some, traditional sweets and all that kind of stuff. So I think, yes, definitely I think if you ask me this question in a year's time, I'll probably be able to give you a more concrete answer with how good the response was.
Okay, great. Before I take Professor Zakaria's question, I have a question for you, Avinash. Can you list down probably about 10, very prominent regional ingredients from the UK which you have used and probably which you would like to use, okay, in your future menus?
Yeah, like you mean like seasonal ingredients from here? Is that what you mean? Yeah, like say right now, I can give you ingredients that are in season right now. Like say nettles are in season right now, which is bichu booty in India.
What season is it now?
It's spring, so we've just I mean it's just the kind of like the end of spring, I'd say, beginning of summer for us. So right now we have in season, we've got from my menu, I can tell you we've got zucchini flowers on the menu, which is spring. We've got like I said, we have wild garlic on the menu. Wild garlic are these leaves that grow in in the wild. They're not garlic. They're not leaves of garlic. It's just a plant that tastes of garlic. So it's a wild garlic leaf. We've made like an ajwaini garlic marination for langoustines, which we grill. So wild garlic, instead of lasuni jinga, for example, we've done something with wild garlic, which is in season and it's very nutritious and a superfood. That's one of the ingredients. We've used that on our langoustine. We've got asparagus on the menu, which we do with our bang jeera chutney. We've got spring vegetable sagu, for example. So spring vegetable sagu. Sagu is this traditional dish from Karnataka, which we've got on our dosa, but we've used spring vegetables like broad beans are in season. We've got peas are in season. Asparagus. We put a few spring carrots in there, so it's like a spring vegetable sagu with coconut and coriander in there. Again, then I already mentioned the bichu booty. Yeah, those are the ingredients that are in right now. I think moving forward in the summer, we get lots of peppers, like red and yellow peppers, which will come into season. We'll get big aubergines, which will come into season. We'll also have all the berries that will come into season, like fruit-wise. If you're asking, we have all the stone fruit, strawberries, raspberries, all those kind of fresh ingredients will come into season. We also have something like right now we have something called wild hops. They're very bitter. They taste like they look like an asparagus, but they're quite bitter. So they're again wild. You can get those. It's very nutritious. I want to use that, but I haven't thought of a way to use it yet. In the summer, we will have tomatoes, different kinds of very, very tasty tomatoes will come into season. So we'll start doing all our salads with tomatoes. We'll do some charts with tomatoes. We'll use fresh tomatoes in our cooking because in the winter, we only use tin tomatoes. So yeah, I mean, that's some of them to name.
What about the meat? Can you tell me something about the meat, the local lamb, local fish?
So local lamb. So lamb, for example, like say local meats. All the meats that we get are local. Say sirloin, we're using sirloin on the menu with a matania chili and yogurt sauce, which is like your lal mas sauce, for example. That's the breed is you get different breeds here. We get Herefordshire beef, which is from Hereford. We get the Aberdeen Angus, which is from Scotland. We have something called Longhorn, which is again, which has got big horns, and they're also a breed here. And we get Limousin, which is a French variety, but is also bred here. So depending, like say, the ones we use, the butchers the ones that they send to us is either Hereford cross with Limousin, or we use the Aberdeen Angus. So they're all aged, dry aged in a Himalayan salt brick wall room for at least 24 to 28 days, which means, when they hang the meat, it's kept at a certain temperature and all the moisture is kind of sucked in by the Himalayan salt bricks. So the meat is very dry and it's got a certain amount of marbling on it, certain amount of fat on it. And it's got this very, tender texture when it's cooked and served medium rare. Lamb, for example, our lamb right now comes from Cornwall. So there are a lot of these salt marshes in Cornwall because it's a seaside, county. So the lamb feeds on these salt marshes, basically. So they eat. So the meat, when you take the meat, it's got this kind of slight hint of salt to it. I wouldn't say it's salty, but it's got that slight hint of seaside saltiness to it. And the abattoir is actually run by one of my friends, where they slaughter the meat in a certain way. They do halal butchering. They do like most of the lamb and chicken we get in this restaurant is halal, because it's because
lamb from Suffolk? You use that
Suffolk
as well?
lamb we use Suffolk lamb in the winter because they're slightly bigger lamb and also they are quite meaty. So right now what we're getting is spring lamb. So they are less than a year old. They're all roaming around. They have about 300 acres of land. They run around. They eat grass all day. They're all grass fed or salt marsh fed. They don't live in restricted areas. They just live out in the wild, like in their area. So we get that. But also when it comes to the pigs, we get Hampshire pigs. They're very large pigs. We get the baby back ribs from them. Again, they're all specific farms. I can't tell you exactly which farm it's come from, with the pork because I'm yet to find out. But the veal is something that comes from Holland. Veal is the only thing that comes from Holland because we don't have permission in this country to slaughter young cows. They think it's inhumane. But our veal is milk fed, and or sometimes grass fed, but very rarely grass fed. So they're very young cows that are slaughtered. We use them, again, very high quality meat. Chickens are British chickens. Chickens are a huge industry in the world, as everyone knows. You can get some genetically altered chickens which grow very fast and all that kind of stuff, which we totally avoid. We get free range chicken. It's all British. It all comes from Suffolk again. Suffolk is this place north of London. It's a county north of London. They have some amazing lamb. They have some amazing chicken, Suffolk chicken. They have Gressingham duck. I'm sure everyone must have heard of Gressingham duck. That's all from the county of Suffolk. They have some amazing flour. They do, wheat flour and all that kind of stuff, which we also buy. So again, chickens, they're more expensive than normal chickens. Just to give you an example, our chickens are like £5.90 a kilo, and you can buy chickens for £3, which comes from God knows where. So just to put you in perspective, the quality.
What about seafood?
Sorry, seafood. Yeah,
different
seafood, very, very, very local. Like say, our langoustines. Just to give you an example, I have to order my langoustines 2 days in advance. If I need langoustines for Thursday, I have to order them on Tuesday, so they can go and actually pick them and put them in a box and put them on a train from Scotland, and it comes down on a train. So they put them overnight, they come on a train, and then we get them live. So that's how local it is, and that's how fresh it is. Same with lobsters. When they're in season, again, lobsters are a very summer thing. They're only it's the breeding season for them, and the spring is obviously breeding season for most animals. So same with lobsters. The prices drop in the summer, so we'll get lobsters only in the summer, because again, it's all sustainable fishing. It's all wild, so you can't really. There's a restriction by the government as to how much you can farm and what sizes you can farm as well. Say fish, we get whatever is in season. Say right now, like say in the winter season, there's a ban on sea bass for 3 months. So during those months, we'll buy some other fish. Same with cod, same with John Dory and all that. But everything we buy is wild, which means it's all line caught. There's no big trawlers going and sweeping up the ocean and getting us. We buy fish from local fishermen. Woods Fish, for example, he will tell us what he got from a local day boat, which means every evening he'll send me a list saying, "Chef, we've got John Dory, we've got squid, we've got this much of this," but he'll only have limited quantities. When it's gone, it's gone. So we have to be quick in ordering these things. So I've got a list for tomorrow right now. First thing in the morning, I got a list. So again, everything from British waters, either Devon, South Devon, but also North Atlantic, which is mainly Scotland and those kind of areas. You get salmon, you get again, salmon has got a very short season. It's summer. Wild salmon, that is. You have loads of farm salmon, which is not very ethical conditions for them, but yeah. Again, fish is very sustainable. Whatever is in like say sometimes there's something called pool prawns. You'll only get them once or twice a year. So when it's on, every restaurant in London, like good restaurants in London, will buy them and put them on the menu. So again, sustainability is key. Pool, Poole, pool prawns. Pool is a place. Pool is a place in the south of England, and there are these tiny little prawns which which come live. They're just jumping around, and we just have to put them in milk, put them in some spiced up flour, and we deep fry them. And then they're crunchy. You just eat them whole with the shell and head and everything. So yeah, those kind of things. Or anchovies, for example, you'll only get them like in a certain season, like say again summer, like late summer, more like July, August. You'll start getting them for a month or so, and so you'll just we'll put them on the menu when it's in season.
Do you plan to use some kind of game as well?
Yes, definitely. Game. We already had game when we opened. We had venison on the menu. So a friend of ours who she's got an estate in Scotland where it's more like a reserve, and they have all these wild venison that are running around in on their farm, basically. So it's not their farm. It's just they're wild. It's not a game farm, but it's just a wild thing where they have to shoot or cull X number of deer every season, just to maintain the fauna of the region. Like say, otherwise they'll just destroy all the fauna, and they'll eat a lot of vegetation over there, and which is not very good for the environment. So the government issues licenses to these people where they can go and shoot, say 300 deers a year or something like that. And they have to, or they'll say, if you don't kill them, we will send the authorities to kill them. So what these people do is they in turn they make it like a sport where people can go and pay for a day where they can go and shoot these deers, and they can take the meat and they cook it for them. So I've collaborated with Alice, who will bring me a couple of animals, like a couple of deers, every week or every 2 weeks, and then we'll just do different things with them. But also same with birds, like we have pheasants, we have grouse, which is a very popular thing. The famous grouse, I'm sure you've seen the whiskies, the picture of a grouse there. Again, they are in abundance, and the season starts on the 12th of August. The hunting season in the UK starts on the 12th of August. It's called the Glorious 12th, where people go out, and it's the official day when people can start hunting. From then to the 12th of December, or till the end of December, you get game. After that, you stop. So spring is when they start breeding, and then 12th of August. So again, you get pheasants, you get partridges, you get grouse, kind of mallard ducks. What else? You get something called teal, which is a really small bird, very gamey. Rabbits, hare. We don't have wild boars in this country, so no wild boars.
Okay, nice. Chef, Professor Zakaria has another question. He says, Indian food has always been synonym with being spicy.
Yeah.
Is this viewpoint changing?
Yeah, definitely. I think, especially with restaurants like ourselves, we are trying to change that concept of making everything extra spicy. I think it's going to take time. Like I said, like people have been fed this greasy, spicy. What is the spiciest curry on your menu? Vindaloo is something that was on every curry house menu, where they said, "Oh, this is the spiciest dish on our menu," and we're trying to change those kind of perceptions by making, we make spicy dishes spicy, and we make milder dishes mild. And I think people are understanding that, especially because they're traveling a lot around the world now. Like say, a saag paneer is a saag paneer. We don't want to make it too spiced up. It's more to taste the greens than the spices. Or dosa and chutney is going to taste like a dosa and chutney that's made traditionally. So yeah, definitely, I think we are trying to change that concept of, like say, Kashmiri food can, it's usually kind of sweetish notes rather than hot and spicy notes. That's why I'm saying, like we're trying to cook regionally as well. Like even with our staff, I always have a map of India in front of me, and I say, look, this region, they grow, like say Guntur, like say Andhra Pradesh, for example. I say Guntur chilies come from here, Andhra Pradesh. The reason it's grown there is because the weather is hot, and that's what grows in this weather, chilies. And also why people eat chili, why their food is very spicy. They say, oh, it's so hot there. Why do you eat chilies in that place? And we said, because the weather is so hot, you eat chilies or spicy food, it raises your body temperature and you start feeling cooler from the outside. That's the reason certain dishes from certain regions are spicy. But if you say, oh, Kashmiri food, for example, they use a lot of nuts and fruits in that region because that's what they grow, and that's what, they eat richer food because it's cold out there, and they need to, have a layer of fat on their body to kind of protect their skin and their body. So trying to explain to them geographically why certain people eat certain kinds of food, and why why the cuisines change from region to region. It's all the geography and the also like history. History has changed a lot of our cuisine. Like say Delhi, I don't think ancient Delhi food was what it is today. It's only because of the Mughal Empire that invaded us. We have certain kinds of flavors and breads and the kind of sauces that we make in those cuisines. And I think that's also something that we should try and adapt when we're teaching our students as well, because I think history and geography play a huge role in not just where a cuisine comes from. It's also to do with where it's going, because I think 100 years from now, Indian food's not going to be what it is today. So I think it's really important for people to go back to their traditional roots and really understand where we come from, in terms of food. It's not a good or a bad thing that we had the Mughals there. It's just why our food and our culture is in a certain way because of those those kind of historical events, which is really important.
Okay, I think Avinash, we've run out of time, but I would like to take this one last question.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ms. Vasundhara, she wants to know, having grown up in Bangalore, what is that one dish that you have taken from here to London?
Oh God, like I think we've taken a lot of dishes. Like for me, the sagu on the menu is, I think, quintessentially Bangalore. If you go to Vidyarthi Bhavan, you get you get like the masala dosa with dosa with potato sagu, and that's something that's that's so traditional. Everyone serves it with sambar, but we said no, we'll do the Vidyarthi Bhavan style. We'll do sagu with our dosa. So that's what we serve here. We serve dosa, sagu, two chutneys, and we also serve the potato palya, because people ask, people say, oh, we want the traditional potato palya as well. So we've got our traditional potato palya as well. So yeah, I guess that's something that's very.
I think if you ask me, you should be taking your bisibede bath and avrekai usli for the winter.
No, of course, we're going to use the avrekai usli and bisibede bath. I mean,
Okay.
the coconut broad beans I've said on the menu is actually avrekai usli, except we've used broad beans here. We can't get avrekai most of the time here, but we do. Sometimes we do get avrekai, which I love to use.
Okay, super. Great, Avinash. So I think it's been 1.5 hours, and I'm sure your throat is dried up, and you need a pint. Sit down. So
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being with us. On your off day and doing this wonderful session. I think it's so clear as to what Indian restaurants, or at least Pali Hill and your philosophy of Indian food, as a chef for the future is to use seasonal and regional produce. Don't go on looking for something that has to be airlifted from some other country. See what you can do with your food. I think that's a super way to get creative and innovative, and bring about new flavors. And yes, England has been branded as a curry house with all the stodgy curries that's available, or was available all these years. I'm sure there's a different market for that as well. But moving ahead, the younger generation would like to see something new on their plate, something cool, something refreshing, something light. And I think you guys have set the standard, set the benchmark there. So once again, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. And thank you everyone for being here.